In this return, we try to undo the damage, wishing the damage had never happened. Talk to anyone who does restoration work. Carpenters who rebuild 150-year-old neglected houses, or conservation biologists who turn agribusiness cornfields back to tall grass prairie. And they'll say it's a complex undertaking. A fluid, responsive process, restoration, requires digging into the past, stretching toward the future, working hard in the present, and the end results rarely, if ever, match the original state. Restoring a tall grass prairie means rebuilding a dynamic system that has been destroyed by the near extinction of bison, the presence of cattle, and generations of agribusiness farming and fire suppression. The goal isn't to recreate a static landscape somehow frozen in time, but rather to foster dynamic interdependencies ranging from clods of dirt to towering thunderheads, tiny microbes to herds of bison. And I want to pause here because I've been seeing some flashes in conjunction with picture taking. I want to ask people to turn their flashes off for now. It's fine if you take pictures of me, but while we're in public space for reasons of access, please refrain from using flashes. If you want to take some pictures of me but need to use a flash, I'm glad to spend some time with you after the event, but while we're in public space, for reasons of access, please turn your flashes off. So thank you a lot, and thanks for bearing with the interruption. This work builds upon knowledge about and experience with an 8,000-year-old ecosystem of which only remnants remain. Isolated pockets of blood plants, milkweed, burrows, and switchgrass growing in cemeteries and on remote bluffs, somehow miraculously surviving. The intention is to mirror this historical ecosystem as closely as possible, even though some element is bound to be missing or different. The return close, but not complete. I circle back to the ideology here, framing it as a kind of restoration reveals the most obvious and essential tenets. First, care requires damage, locating the harm entirely within individual human body minds, operating as if each person were her own ecosystem. Second, it grounds itself in an original state being, relying upon a belief that what existed before is superior to what exists currently. And finally, it seeks to return what is damaged to that former state of being. But for some of us, even if we accept disability as damage to individual body minds, these tenets quickly become tangled because an original, non-disabled state of being doesn't exist. How would I, or the medical industrial complex, go about restoring my body-mind? The vision of me without trembling hands and slurred speech, with more balance and coordination, doesn't originate from my visceral history. Rather, it arises from an imagination of what I should be like, from some definition of normal and natural. 2, walking the prairie. My friend Jay and I walk in the summer rain through a 30-acre pocket of tallgrass prairie that was not so long ago one big agribusiness cornfield. We follow the path mowed at the firebreak. He carries a big flowered umbrella. Water droplets hang on the grasses. Spiderwebs glint. The bee balm hasn't blossomed yet. He points out the numerous patches of birch, goldenrod, and thistle. The first 2 belong here but need to be thinned out. The thistle, on the other hand, should be entirely uprooted. The Canada wild rye wave the big blue stem almost open. Clusters of sunflowers brighten the rainy day. We pause to admire the cornflowers and asters. The songbirds and butterflies have taken shelter, but the moment all is quiet. Soon my jeans are sopping wet from the knees down. This little piece of prairie is utterly different from a cornfield. A whole group of people, including Jay, worked for over a decade to restore this land with financial and material help from Wisconsin's Department of Natural Resources. They mowed and burned the cornfield. They broadcast the seed, sack upon sack of the right mix that might replicate the tallgrass prairie that was once here. They rooted out thistle and prickly ash. They saved money for more seed, working to undo 2 centuries of environmental destruction wreaked by plowed pesticides, acres upon acres of soybeans and corn. The Department of Natural Resources partners with this work precisely because the damage is so great. Without the massive web of prairie roots to anchor the earth, the land now known as Wisconsin is literally draining away. Rain catches the topsoil, washing it from field to creek to river to ocean. Prairie restoration reverses this process, both stabilizing and creating soil. Jay and his friends worked hard, remembering all the while that neither they nor the dairy farmer down the road owned this land. It was stolen a century and a half from the eastern Dakota people. The history of grass, dirt, bison massacre, genocide live here, floating in the air, tunneled into the earth. During my visits to see Jay, I have taken this walk a dozen times over the last 15 years. At noon with sun blazing, at dusk with fireflies lacing the grasses, at dawn with finches and warblers greeting the day. My feet still feel the old cornfield furrows. As we return to the farmhouse, I think about natural and the unnatural, trying to grasp their meanings. Is an agribusiness cornfield unnatural or restored prairie? Is an agribusiness cornfield unnatural or restored prairie natural? How about the abundance of thistle, absence of bison, those old corn furrows. What was once normal here? What can we consider normal now? Or are these the wrong questions? Maybe the earth just holds layer upon layer of history. 3, wishing you less pain. You and I know each other through a loose national network of queer disability activists made possible by the internet. Online, one evening, I received a message from you containing the cyber equivalent to a long, anguished moan of physical pain. You explain that you're having a bad pain day, and it helps to acknowledge the need to howl. Before I log off, I type a good night to you, wish you a little less pain for the morning. Later, you thank me for not wishing you a pain-free day. You say, the question isn't whether I'm in pain, but rather how much. As I get to know you in person, you tell me I read medical journals hoping for a breakthrough in pain treatment that might make a difference. You work to locate a doctor who might believe your reports of pain. Work to create the appropriate script, the exact words and story that will open the door, lead doctors to treat you as a patient rather than a drug-seeking criminal. Work to obtain the necessary scripts, the actual prescriptions. Work to find the right balance of narcotics. You work and work and work some more. The rhetoric of many disability activists declares there's nothing wrong with our disabled body minds, even as we differ from what's considered normal. I have used this line myself more than once, to which you respond. Resisting the assumption that we are wrong or broken makes sense, but the chronic, fatiguing hell pain I live with is not a healthy variation, not a natural body-mind difference. I grasp at the meanings of natural and unnatural again. The moments and locations where disability and chronic pain occur, can we consider them natural as our fragile, resilient human body-minds interact with the world? As is it natural when the spine snaps after being flung from a car or a horse, when the brain processes information in fragmented ways after being exposed to lead, mercury, pesticides? Can the body-mind be deemed both natural and abnormal? I ask because I don't understand. And when are those moments and locations of disability and chronic pain unnatural as war, toxic landfills, child abuse, and poverty? 4, cautionary tale. And here we come, 30 minutes into the talk, to the title of the talk. Part 4, cautionary tale. You and I meet at a disability community event. We end up in a long conversation about shame and love. You tell me that the military dumped trichloroethylene near your childhood home, that chemical leaching into the groundwater and shaping your disabled body mind as you floated in the utero. When you talk to people about this pollution and its impact, they most often respond with pity, turning you and your wheelchair into a tragedy. As you tell me this story, I think of a series of advertisements in the Sierra's campaign, the Sierra Club's campaign, Beyond Coal. And on this slide is one of the images from that campaign, and I'll be describing the image right now. In one, the tagline reads, quote, asthma, birth defects, cancer, enough, end quote, superimposed over a looming smoke belching power plant. And this next slide is a second ad from that campaign. And another, we see the big belly of a pregnant woman dressed in pink, one hand cupping her stomach. Her skin is light brown, her face is invisible, her belly is captioned, quote, this little bundle of joy is now a reservoir of mercury, end quote. The fine print tells us, quote, mercury pollution from our nation's coal-burning power plants is harming pregnant women and their unborn children. Mercury is a powerful neurotoxin that can damage the brain and nervous system, causing developmental problems and learning disabilities, end quote. To persuade viewers that these plants need to be shut down, both ads use disability to make an argument about the consequences of environmental destruction. There's so much to pull apart here about gender and race. The second ad relies on stereotypes about femininity and the supposed vulnerability of women and children, and objectifies a woman of color, reducing her to a body part, which is then further reduced to a reservoir. And at the center of this argument is disability. And now on the screen is a slide of both ads side by side, so we can be looking at both of them as they do a little more pulling apart of their meanings. Seemingly, the ads ask us to act in alliance with the people most impacted by the burning of coal, people of color and poor people who all too often work amidst and live near environmental damage. But digging down a bit, the Sierra Club twists away from solidarity, focusing instead on particular kinds of body-mind conditions, asthma, birth defects, cancer, learning disabilities, transforming them into symbols for environmental damage. This strategy works because it taps into ableism. It assumes that viewers will automatically understand disability and chronic illness to be a tragedy in need of prevention and eradication, and that this tragedy will, in turn, persuade us to join the struggle. Certainly, ending environmental destruction will prevent some kind of body-mind conditions. But by bluntly using ableism, the ads conflate justice with the eradication of disability. The price disabled and chronically ill people pay for this argument is high. It reduces our experiences of breathing, of living with conditions, being birth effect of having cancer, of learning in a multitude of ways to proofs of injustice. This reduction disregards ableism as a primary location of the problem, quote unquote, of disability, and ignores the brilliant imperfection of our lives. It declares us as unnatural as coal-burning power plants. The price of this argument would be one thing if it occurred in isolation. But the Sierra Club's rhetoric is only a single example in a long line of public health campaigns against drunk driving, drug use, lead paint, asbestos, unsafe sex, and on, to use disability and chronic illness as a cautionary tale. Amidst this cacophony, you want to know how to express your hatred of military pollution without feeding the assumption that your body-mind is tragic, wrong, and unnatural. No easy answers exist. You and I talk intensely. Both the emotions and ideas are dense. We arrive at a slogan for you. I hate the military and love my body. Undoubtedly, we could have come up with a catchier or more complex slogan. For sure, we could have done that. But at the same time, it lays bare an essential question. How do we witness, name, and resist the injustices that reshape and damage all kinds of body minds, plant and animal, organic and inorganic, non-human and human, while not equating disability with injustice? So in switching the slides back to the image of the tallgrass prairie that we saw in the title slide, essentially so we don't have to continue looking at the Sierra Club ad when I finish the talk. Though there are two more sections to the talk. 5, yearning for the peeper pond. Many of us mourn the vacant lots, woods, and swamps we played in as children, now transformed into landfills, strip malls, and parking lots. We fear the wide-reaching impact of climate change as hurricanes grow more frequent, glaciers melt, and deserts expand. We long for the days when bison roam the Great Plains and Chinook salmon swim upstream in the millions we desire a return. And so environmentalists, partly motivated by this longing, have started to learn the art and science of ecological restoration. They broadcast tallgrass prairie seeds, raise and release wolves, bison, whooping cranes. They tear up drainage tiles and reroute water back into what used to be wetlands. They pick up trash, blow up dams, plant trees, hoping beyond hope that they can restore ecosystems to some semblance of their former selves before the white, colonialist, capitalist, industrial damage was done. When it works, restoration can be a powerful force contributing to the Earth's well-being as well as providing an antidote to loss. But the damage may be irreversible, some ecosystems irreplaceable. Restoration may take centuries, may be a band-aid stuck on a gaping wound. We may not be able to fix what has been broken. Below my house, on the edge of the cow pastures, there used to be a little swampy pond surrounded by cattails where, in the early spring, just before the ice melted, hundreds of peepers would breed. These small, light brown frogs would sing through the night. Sometimes I'd walk to the pond and stand for 10 or 15 minutes, surrounded by their coarse egrons and chests reverberating, shoes growing soggy. 2 summers ago, neighbors built a house down there. I watched the structure go up, but didn't register what it might mean for the peepers. Last spring, I headed down to the pond as usual, tromping through the upper field, then the hedgerow, coming out at the western edge of the cow pastures. But there was no pond, no chorus of peepers falling silent as I approached. I wandered around for a while, feeling disoriented, before I realized that my neighbor's backyard was exactly where the peeper pond used to be. It's a tiny loss in the scheme of things. This patch of land, occupied Abenaki territory, has endured so much ecological change in the almost 4 centuries since white people stole it. We've clear-cut it 3 times, fenced it with stone walls, hedgerows, barbed wire, planted grass, put sheep and cows out to graze, built houses and barns in wetlands, created manure piles, drilled wells for water, leaked gas, made garbage heaps of wire, glass, mattresses, tires, railroad ties, bulldozed roads. More than enough damage has been done, and yet many native plants and animals are somehow doing well, including the peepers. Still, I miss this particular peeper pond, yearn to stand again at its edge, listening. There's no return to the time before my neighbor's house, before the cows and sheep, before white people arrived. Instead, I carried these losses with me, and slowly learning the importance of bearing witness, a quiet daily recognition so different from the desire to repair. I let these losses sit uncomfortably in my heart. And at the same time, I walk in the woods, I recycle, I take to the streets to shut down the natural gas pipeline that Vermont Gas wants to build not far from here. I remember that the Abenaki Nation has not vanished. 4 bands making home on the land currently known as Vermont. They've relearned old traditions and they're creating new ones. They've gained recognition from the state government. They've acquired in recent years several pieces of land, one of them an old burial site, and another a sacred spot they've frequented for thousands of years. They join indigenous people from all over the world in finding new ways to survive, to cultivate well-being, to defend their sovereignty, and still there is no return to the past. 6, and this is the last section of the talk, Cautionary, my anti-queer politics. I have long brandished a vehement anti-queer politics to defend myself from the unending assertion that disability equals damage, lack of health, defect. In one diatribe I write, quote, and this comes from my first book, Exile and Pride, Disability, Queerness, and Liberation. In one diatribe I write, quote, rather than a medical cure, we want civil rights, equal access, gainful employment, the opportunity to live independently, good and respectful health care, unsegregated education. Needless to say, a cure is not high on our list, end quote. In direct response, and I know very clearly this is direct response to the quote I just read. In direct response, white, queer, disabled, and chronically ill writer Peggy Munson states, quote, this politics does not apply to those of us who see treatment or cure as the only viable accommodation that would allow us back into society. I spent too many days in a place beyond living, watching hours of reality TV, because reality has become like an interesting form of fiction to me. I am too sick to have employment, attend in a school, or live independently without treatment or cure, end quote. I could quibble about treatment versus cure, protest by saying I've never been anti-treatment, but in actuality, my anti-cure politics had all too often shut out chronically ill people. I need to say, with Peggy Munson's words, I listened to a cancer survivor who says, quote, I'm not at war with my body, but at the same time, I won't passively let my cancer cells have their way with me, end quote. I listen to my friend for whom a pain-free day doesn't exist. She says, quote, the chronic, fatiguing how pain I live with is not healthy, end quote. I listened to a power user who told me recently, quote, my wheelchair is part of me that I wouldn't give up, but my lungs that threaten to kill me every time I get a cold, I would trade them in for a better pair without a second thought, end quote. I let their voices jostle my anti-cure politics. As I listen, I feel the lived experiences of illness, disorder, debilitating pain and exhaustion, the moments when disability is in truth linked to being unhealthy. They ask me to pay attention. Disabled feminist thinker Susan Wendell writes, quote, some unhealthy disabled people experience physical and psychological burdens that no amount of social justice can eliminate. Therefore, some very much want to have their bodies cured, not as a substitute for curing ableism, but in addition to it, end quote. She insists on all our looping realities, refusing a disability politics that denies illness. All too often, even in disability communities, chronically ill people hear, you don't seem sick. You can't be sick again. It's all in your head. I let Wendell's words jostle me too. Amidst these voices, I think again about the Sierra Club's ads, which, while leveraging ableist fear, also make important connections between environmental destruction and illness. They tell us unequivocally, pay attention, burning coal causes cancer and asthma. Frustratingly, in its current form, this environmental message also transforms illness into a symbol. However, I can imagine a slightly different series of billboards and commercials integrating a broad-based, multi-issue politics of chronic illness and disability. They would locate injustice in many places all at once, in coal burning and extracting fossil fuels from the ground, and poisoning the planet and the many beings that make home here, including humans, and the racism and classism that force poor people and/or people of color to live and work near environmental destruction. Cancer and asthma would become not symbols, but lived realities amidst injustice. Using this broad-based multi-issue politics as a guide, the restoration of health doesn't only involve the use of medical technology to repair boys' lungs and return his breathing to normal, or to stop the ravages of cancer in a woman's body and create permanent remission. Cure also requires dismantling racism, poverty, and environmental injustice. I let health and cure take on multiple meanings. At the same time, in a world saturated with ableism, it's difficult to acknowledge the connections between disability, chronic illness, and injustice, while also holding on to the inherent value of disabled and chronically ill people. I yearn for a future where everyone has health care that promotes well-being and self-determination, enough nourishing food to eat, access to clean, plentiful water, and warm, dry, safe places to live. I long for a time after we've stopped spewing tens of thousands of human-made toxins, cleaned up garbage dumps, radiation leaks, and oil spills, put an end to body-mind breaking work conditions. I'm desperate for a world where war, imperialism, and genocide no longer exist, and colonial settler nations are making ongoing reparations. In this imagined future, the body-mind differences we now call disability and chronic illness will be diminished, some of them eradicated. Yet humans are too fragile and the world too unpredictable for disabled and sick people to disappear. And if we did, what a loss that would be. And let this multitude of relationships we have to disability, illness, suffering, and cure jostle me, knowing that I need this exact tangle of conflicting and overlapping conversations, holding in the all, sickness and human vulnerability, health and disability, the need for and rejection of cure is much harder work than writing anti-cure diatribes, and much more necessary. Thank you.